Wednesdays with Lawrence Gilman, former executive with the Canucks, Leafs, Jets, and Coyotes, who joins us. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Matt. How are you doing?
Yeah, outstanding. What'd you make of the game in Chicago last night?
Well, if you're a coach of a team and at the end of the night, you look at the game sheet and you see that you got 2 goals out of your third line, a goal out of your fourth line, 2 power play goals, and solid goaltending effort, you have to be fairly happy with that and probably are going to sleep pretty well at night.
Well, funny you mentioned that. And funny you mentioned that because, and I think some of this was maybe pre-orchestrated because he just needed to criticize them eventually. He's been playing kid gloves with them a little bit because of the slower start to the season, but he had some criticism. He wasn't animated about it, but he said way too many chances in the middle of the ice and that they got away with a lot of it because of Kevin Lankinen's play. So do you think he was just saving that in his back pocket, something he needed to get off his chest, but was unwilling to when they were kind of middling there to start the season?
Well, to quote my good friend Elaine Vigneault for the second week in a row, never critique a win. But having said that, as much as I liked what I saw from the Canucks offensively last night, there were some serious defensive lapses, both by, Tyler Myers and Carson Soucy had an absolutely dreadful evening. And, blame can't be laid solely upon the bottom 4 defensive pairs, or bottom 4 defensemen, because I think there were some seriously missed assignments and some sloppiness in the defensive zone. And over the course of the full season, if you don't, take care of the details, it's going to come back and bite you, and you will not be a championship team.
Hey, Lawrence, you mentioned last week that you crossed paths with Tocchet in Arizona. Tell us about the guy you knew then and what you see from him these days with the big whistle.
Well, I have a ton of respect for Rick Tocchet. He is, as I said last week, he's someone who holds everyone accountable. It didn't matter if you were Wayne Gretzky or if you were Stan Wilson, the equipment manager, or if you were Rich Nairn, the PR guy. He's just has a way about him. And actually, I worked with him twice because he played for us in Phoenix as well as came back as an assistant coach. He's just a tremendously honest and earnest individual who looks people in the eye and demands the most out of them because he demands the most out of himself.
He's done some learning as a coach since then, but did you think that he had a mind for coaching X's and O's, that sort of stuff way back then?
In fairness, I didn't.
Yeah.
I thought he was a visceral coach who would need a strategist, like a Newell Brown-esque assistant.
Right.
But I think, having worked with Mike Sullivan, who I've also worked with in the past, who is an exceptional coach and a strategist, I think, like all of us, he's learned along the way. And he's, rounded himself out. He has a great staff in Vancouver, and he relies upon them. But he's clearly evolved, and he's done a great job, and I think he's an excellent coach.
Hey, Lawrence, Kevin Lankinen has been the story of this young Canucks season. Basically now the starting goaltender in there for Thatcher Demko and performing marvelously. Why did he last so long in free agency this summer?
Well, it's because he's been underexposed his entire career. He came into the league on an absolutely dreadful Chicago Blackhawks team where he came from Finland as a starting goaltender in year 1. Year 2, he lost that job to Marc-Andre Fleury, whom the Blackhawks had acquired the prior offseason. He then goes to Nashville, which is a great hockey market and an unbelievable city, but it's also underexposed. And he played behind UC Saros, who's a great goaltender and likes a high workload. And, when teams are building their rosters in the offseason, I would say that your second or potentially third goaltender is probably the last on your priority list. Teams are looking to fill greater needs than, depth goaltending. And, I know that he had opportunities with a number of different teams. I think he took a look at the situation that was in Vancouver with uncertainty with Thatcher Demko, and he made a great decision. And, credit the Canucks, credit Patrick Alvin and the Canucks pro scouting staff for, identifying, a hidden gem, so to speak. And, he's done a great job. Like these last 3 games, he's played absolutely lights out. And he looks calm in the net, too, which I think is a, tremendous aspect of a goaltender.
Yeah, second straight year where Alvin has added a goaltender late in the offseason who has come in and done great work, including Casey DeSmith last year. Connor Garland, he's indispensable to this lineup. Lawrence, and it was a year ago that there was a trade request with this player, and they spent the previous year trying to trade him with a contract that nobody wanted.
And most of the market was there cheering it on, saying, yep, time to move on, time to get – and now I don't think that anybody would want that to happen.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any comparables there, Lawrence? Can you think of a guy who's asked for a trade? They couldn't get rid of him, and next thing you know, he's indispensable in the lineup?
Well, I'd have to think about that to reply. But, the critical thing is that, first of all, the inmates don't run the asylum in a well-run hockey operations department. And just because a player wants out and wants to be traded, that doesn't mean that's necessarily in the best interest of the organization, particularly if they can't find fair market value for the person. I have always said that, over an 82-game, 186-day season, everyone has problems. And there's always two ways to deal with your problem. You either solve your problem or you get rid of your problem. 9 times out of 10, in my experience, the easiest solution is to get rid of your problem. But 9 times out of 10, the best solution is to solve your problem. And credit to both, Canucks management, Rick Tocchet and his coaching staff, and to Connor Garland as well, that they clearly solved their problem. And I am a huge Connor Garland fan. I have been going back to his days in Phoenix. I like the way he competes. He brings, character and moxie to a lineup. And he's a really skilled hockey player. He plays with a lot of snot, and a lot of teams need that element. And clearly, I watched, he looked really comfortable with the move to the first power play last night in that game, and scored a nice goal that off the feed from Pettersson. Like he's a good player, and sometimes when you play with emotion, and you're a fiery individual. Hearts get broken and feelings get hurt along the way. But as I said, credit to all the parties involved for staying through the calm and solving their problems.
I think people were pretty excited, cautiously optimistic at the start of the season when they looked at this roster. I think they saw the flaws on the defensive side of things for sure. But on the forward lines in particular, I think people were pretty excited. And I think for the first time in a long time, Lawrence, I don't think people saw obvious bad contracts, at least active contracts on this roster, which made the sort of the dreams of, hey, who do we trade? Because you got to trade something to get something generally in this league. It didn't make that obvious. Like last year at the outset, it was pretty obvious. If you could trade Ilya Mikheyev, you should trade him. There were players like that. There's not an obvious one. So at the outset of the season, you sort of looked and you're like, hey, you're going to have to hold your nose to trade something of substance to get the, that defenseman. Who's that? And maybe Garland. Maybe in the worst case, maybe you have to trade Besser. Boy, those guys are just proving that right now, you can't imagine trading either of those guys. Besser just quietly goes about his business, and he's on a great pace again. And we just talked about Connor Garland. I mean, there's nobody right now that is obvious to get off this roster.
Well, judging from the last 3 games that I've seen, I can't really find a problem that I would want to get rid of. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Or someone who isn't playing the role that the coaching staff or management wants them to play. That being said, you don't get players from other organizations for nothing. And if the Canucks want to address a need and, let's say, bolster their defense, they're going to have to find some form of capital to give up, whether that's a prospect, a draft pick. And, as we all know in this world, Canucks are sitting with $500,000 of cap space. Something's going to have to give on that roster if they're going to add a player at another point.
Hey, Lawrence, what did you make of the decision to not extend Besser this summer and wait and get another year of information?
Well, there's a distinction between being a full 40-goal scorer and being a guy who scored 40 goals.
Right.
And I would categorize Brock Besser as the latter as opposed to the former. Prior to this past season, he rode last season from an incredible hot streak to start to an incredible cold streak to finish. And, prior to last year, his premier goal total was 29 goals in his rookie season. After that, he sort of settled in. He had a season of 26 goals, a couple seasons of 23 goals, and he missed a number of games in each season due to injury. Jim Rutherford is obviously a veteran hockey manager, and Patrick Alvin has shown he has the chops to do the job. I don't blame them for sitting back and waiting to see what happens. If Besser, and the onus is on him, because if he does come back and score 40 goals for a consecutive season, he is a 40-goal scorer, and he's going to get paid. But, Brock Besser's an interesting player. I mean, he's got an unbelievable shot. He's got a great release. but he doesn't drive play, not the same way that a player like JT Miller or Elias Pettersson does. Goal scorers do get paid, and he's going to get paid handsomely, but he's got to prove it. Much like William Nylander did last year. The Toronto Maple Leafs didn't, negotiate a contract with him before the year began. Nylander came out and played well, and got paid handsomely for it. Besser does the same. He'll be cashing big checks too.
There's something to be said for a guy that just scores goals. And he had a great shot when he arrived, Lawrence. I don't know that by comparison, it's that actually that great. Like, I think Pettersson and Miller with their shots in A1 shape are better shots than Besser, actually. But he just finds a way right now. And there's something to be said for that. Although I do wonder about paying that guy commensurate market value, given he doesn't have an exemplary skill per se outside of just filling the net, which I guess you have to eventually pay up for.
If you're gonna have one skill,
yeah,
that's the one to have.
There's an old expression in this business, and that goal scorers get paid, irrespective of whether they're forwards or defensemen. I mean, you win games by scoring goals, right? Yeah. So, I mean, if you're gonna, and that's right, if you're gonna have one defining skill, that's probably a pretty good one to have.
Yeah.
Hey, Lawrence, you were, if memory serves, you were at the draft table there in 2015 when Besser was the pick at 23rd overall. Was that like a slam dunk for everybody? Like, oh, best player available, got to get this guy? Was there a debate? What was the discussion on Besser?
Jim Benning absolutely loved Brock Besser. And it was, if this guy's going to be available when we pick, we're going to take him. But quite frankly, as my recollection, as I recall, we didn't think he was going to be available. We thought he was going to go around somewhere in the 10 to 15 range. And we were pretty certain, I think, if I'm not mistaken, again, Boston had 3 picks.
That's right.
In the middle of the draft.
Yeah.
And we were fairly certain that he would go in one of those picks. And we just sat there and waited. And when he became available, credit to Jim Benning, he didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger. We're taking this guy. And it was a good pick.
Well, one of those picks where you run to Central Registry because you can't believe the guy is still there. Last question for you, Lawrence. Nils Höglander, he's playing more even strength. It's been tough love with a few coaches here now, but he's now up to playing a lot of even strength minutes. He scores all his goals outside of the power play, or at least did last season. And the Canucks saw fit to extend him 3-by-3 on the eve of the season. What did you make of that extension and sort of the maturation evolution of this player over the last few years?
Well, last year was his first really full season in the league. As a 23-year-old, he had 24 goals and 36 points in limited ice time. And I think, again, credit needs to go to Canucks management for assessing what they have quickly and locking it up in a longer-term bridge deal. And what you have now is you have a skilled, competitive young player playing in your top 6 at $3 million per year and playing on your second power play unit as well. You in this business, you need to hedge your bets at times and you need to guess right. And by all accounts at this stage, it looks like Canucks management made a shrewd move. You've got a defined asset that's set for the next 3 years at $3 million as a top six winger. That's good business.
Before you go, you saw a nice picture of 2 play-by-play guys for the Vancouver Canucks over the years, Rick Ball and John Shorthouse.
Saw that.
They were,
they were in the upper reaches of the United Center.
Opposite sides of the ice, if you will, for that game. But there was a moment, of course, back in 2011 in the playoffs where Rick and I were walking in to the booth to do a post-game show for a playoff game, and there was a big commotion in the suite beside us because the fans of the United Center, as unruly as they tend to be, started to jaw with Canucks management. Who was the instigator? Was it you? Was it Mike Gillis?
Yeah, right.
Who gets 2 minutes for instigating?
I do, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And it
wasn't Henning, that's for sure.
Well, if you recall in that game, what happened was, the vitriol began to rise, but you have to go back. So in that first round of playoffs, you have like 3 broadcasts, different broadcasts. So we were moved to this ancillary suite, which was right where the fans were. Normally, the visiting team doesn't sit there. And the fans, before the game started, they were joking with us and, But as the game went on, and the game was a nasty game, and the vitriol started to rise, and if my memory serves me correct, the catalyst was when Rafi Torres hit Brent Seabrook behind the net, and the fans just lost their minds. And one of the guys turned to me and he said, "Seabrook didn't touch the puck. Seabrook didn't touch the puck." And I looked at him and I said, "He doesn't have to touch the puck for the hit to be real." And then somebody next to him started to really say some nasty things to me. And I suggested that he go home to his mother's basement and do a few other things.
Right.
And that's what set the whole thing on fire. And I actually thought that Mike Gillis was going to jump into the crowd and beat the living daylights out of everybody in sight.
And Mike's a big guy. That's a good bodyguard to have on your side.
Yeah, I felt bad afterwards. Not really, but he turned 16 shades of purple.
Yes. We know the way. Yeah. We know the way.
And there's no doubt that he wasn't the one who instigated the crowd. It was me.
I just feel bad for Lauren Henning and what you guys dragged him into.
He's slubbing Lauren Henning.
Exactly. Lauren didn't open his mouth.
Lauren's sitting there going, "I'm too old for this shit." Hey, fun times, Lawrence, down memory lane, and great analysis on the present day Canucks. Thanks for this. Until next Wednesday.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week if I'm not employed.
Yeah.